I'd like to bring up before our meeting? Seeing no committee business, we're going to move to item topic A, approval of the minutes from the September 11th, 2023 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes for September 11, 2023.
I second the motion.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we'll go to item B. It's an ordinance discussion of Highline Water District franchise ordinance. Mr. Elliott.
Good afternoon, Council Chair, members of the committee, members of the council. I'm here to talk about the franchise ordinance with Highline. The question before you is, should the city grant Highline Water District a franchise to install, operate, maintain, and repair the water distribution system within the city of Federal Way? Highline requested the franchise to provide water distribution in the north end of the city. The franchise has a 10-year term with 2 5-year extensions possible. The work will be guaranteed through performance and maintenance bonds. The insurance is consistent with the city standards. The area in green is the southern boundary of the Highline. The city limits are bounded by the orange line. So we have basically a small area that we're considering. Highline overall has 18,800 connections in 7 cities and unincorporated King County plus the port. There are currently 263 connections within the city. The council options are to approve sending the Highline franchise ordinance to the city council meeting on October 18th for the first reading, or do not approve it and sending the franchise and giving us some sort of direction. The mayor's recommendation is to approve the franchise ordinance and send it on. How did the date change?
Councilmember Walsh, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
In the past, how's that, if there hasn't been a franchise agreement, how has that been happening in the past?
Actually, they predated the city, but what they have done, and with all of their cities and the unincorporated, they just continue to operate under the assumption they didn't need to get one.
Okay.
So they've been operating just that way since the beginning.
And what has changed now?
What happened was that most of the cities recognized suddenly that they hadn't been doing this. The cities hadn't been receiving any kind of tax funds for their operation, and we all went after them about the same time. We are the 7th, well, technically 9th, because unincorporated King has also gotten their franchise done.
So will we now receive utility tax
We will,
on them? Okay,
yes.
and we haven't in the past?
No, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is, do you have a rough number what that utility tax would be on a yearly or monthly basis?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay,
That finance end is not mine.
yeah, okay. Deputy,
Whoever.
Council President Colsar. Linda.
Hey, you. So, Mr. Elliott, I know that we also get sewer from the city of Tacoma, we get water,
Yes,
correct? But do we have a franchise agreement with them?
yes, ma'am, we do.
We do. And do we get sewer from I know we have, Lake Haven has 2 sewer
We have
treatment
Lake
plants.
Haven and we have Midland, I believe, is
Midway.
the other
Midway.
sewer district.
So do they need a franchise agreement as well? Midway?
They will.
Oh.
I believe they're coming up on renewal in, don't quote me on this, I believe it's the next 3 years.
So we already had an agreement with Midway.
Yes. I
And
believe
somehow
so,
we missed
yes.
Highline. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was, Highline was the only outstanding one that we've found.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, do I have a motion?
Chair Dovi, I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on October 17, 2023.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move to item C, on-call sidewalk and curb replacement contract approval and award. Mr. Larson.
All right, good evening, Council Chair, Deputy Mayor, Council President, council members. My name is Jared Larson. I'm here to present the on-call sidewalk curb and replacement contract approval to award. Policy question, should council authorize award of the on-call curb replacement? Sorry, this little window's right in the way here. Should council authorize award of the on-call sidewalk and curb replacement contract to the lowest responsible bidder? Well, we're skipping over here. There we go. Project background, replace $20,000 to approximately $100,000 of concrete sidewalk and curb each year. On-call agreement provides an efficient way to timely complete work. Small works contract bid process for multi-year contract. We received 3 bids. This allows for unit price increases tied to Puget Sound Consumer Price Index. Contract award and funding, not to exceed the amount of $350,000. Maximum of 3 years with the option to extend for one-year term. Funded via the Streets Operations Fund under the 101, comprised of motor vehicle excise tax and the general fund. And additional funding may be available via the annual ADA retrofit under Fund 306. Options considered. 1, authorize award of the on-call sidewalk and curb replacement contract to the Asphalt Patch Systems Incorporated, the lowest responsible bidder, in an amount not to exceed $350,000 for a 3-year term with option for one-year extension. Option 2, do not authorize award of the on-call sidewalk and curb replacement agreement and provide directions. The mayor recommends option 1. Are there any questions?
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. What sidewalks will we be replacing?
So the street maintenance supervisor has been putting together a list over the last couple of years. This list is, we've got 36 locations identified now. Primarily, we're gonna focus on arterials and collector roads. Really, it's been prioritized to what has deteriorated the most and what is in need of replacement. What comes to mind, there's a handful on South 312th Street. But that's where we're gonna go. And these are all task order based, so we identify what needs to be replaced within the public right of way. And then we'll issue a task order, negotiate a price based off of the bid items, and then go from there.
So I've been having discussions with sidewalks and staff lately, and my understanding is that we're responsible for sidewalks along arterials, but we're also responsible for sidewalks along collector streets?
No, so we are responsible for ADA ramps at intersections along collector streets. So this is what Jared's talking about. It's the arterials and the key ADA ramps that have
Well, that's-
dissolved.
This won't be replacing the sidewalks on the collector streets, but the ramps?
No, the sidewalk portion is on the arterial streets. It's only for what the city is responsible for.
Yeah.
It is not responsible for 11th, for example.
Oh, okay. So what's a collector street again? What's the definition of
Like,
one?
Dash Point Road would be a collector, 312th would be a well, no, sorry, 312th is an arterial. The second class roads would be collectors.
Does it depend on the size of the road or the speed limit?
All of the above, as well as traffic volume.
Do you have a list of those? Somewhere?
They're on the comp plan, yeah.
Okay.
It is defined, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, do we have a motion?
Chair, I move to forward option 1 to the October 17, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I guess you get to stay up there one more time and talk to
I
us
do.
about the right-of-way landscape maintenance contract.
Okay, the 2023 right-of-way landscape maintenance contract. This is the approval to amend. Policy question. Should council approve the amendment of the current 2023 right-of-way landscape maintenance contract with Macmore Incorporated through December 31st, 2025 for an additional not-to-exceed amount of $478,784.04, provided that the contract authorization for 2025 is contingent upon budget approval? Project background. Right-of-way landscape maintenance is accomplished through both contract and city staff. This also includes litter picks and garbage container services. Maintenance contract was awarded to Macmore Incorporated in October 2022 for 1 calendar year with the option to amend the contract, including increases based on the Puget Sound Consumer Price Index. Macmore has successfully completed work with the city for the past 6 years and has provided an excellent level of service. The budget breakdown, so combined total costs for 2024 and 2025 is $478,784, and that includes the Department of Ecology Interstate Grant for cleanup on the ramps. The approved budget for 2024-2025 is $490,000. Options considered. Authorize council to amend the current contract for a 2-year period, 2024 and 2025, to include the base bid plus alternate one, plus $60,000 for the interstate ramp cleanup. Continuation of the contract through 2025 is contingent upon the future adopted budget, including these contract expenditures. Option 2, do not authorize amendment to the contract and provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends option 1. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So
Yes.
we've budgeted it for 2024 already,
Yes.
correct? And you're asking that we extend it for 1 year contingent on it being budgeted in the next go-round. Is that what I understand it?
That's correct.
Okay, and what happens if we don't budget for it, or it's a different number than what you show it going up by the I'm assuming the differentials because of CPI.
If it's not budgeted for, then there just won't be that additional year on the contract term.
So when I look at that, if they're 40%, we're spending about $1 million a year on maintenance, plus or minus, landscape and cleanup and things like that, 40, 60?
Round numbers, you're
1-1.
correct, yeah.
So if it didn't get budgeted, then would it be, for heaven forbid it doesn't, but then the 60% we would still potentially have in our budget, it would be the 40% that we'd be talking about, not.
Correct. So the 60% is staff.
Yeah,
So it-
60% is our
Yeah.
people on
So-
payroll, that's their job.
Yes. So if it's not budgeted effectively, there will be a reduction in service of what we're doing today.
And how many people do they have doing this work, the 40% of the work?
It fluctuates throughout the year. So in the summer, it swells to, typically they run 2 to 3 crews. When they're in the city, they may have 10 to 12 people, but then they're not working 5 days a week necessarily the same way our crews are. They're doing work in the city, then they're going and doing work for other cities, other agencies, et cetera, and then they're coming back. So when they're in the city, it's 10 to 12 people, but it's not, you can't really compare that to straight staff. So really where we use this is as staffing needs swell and shrink based on the time of year, they're absorbing that as opposed to additional city staff.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. It's IC 2425, so isn't that a 2-year extension?
It is, that's correct, but it's 2024 is already budgeted, and this is within the approved budget. So I think what Chair Dovey's talking about is 2025 would be the question mark if that's not in the 25-26 budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, are they expected to perform a certain number of hours total for the year?
It really comes down to the project areas and the tasks that they're working on. The individual hours which it takes them to complete the work, if EJ can correct me, really comes down to their performance. So they're paid based off of a certain amount of mows, a certain amount of hardline edging, a certain amount of trimming, herbicide application, and things of that nature. So the time that it takes them to complete them isn't necessarily what we're
Okay,
paying
'cause
for.
it's
It's more of a
project
task.
completion.
Yes.
Okay, so, and this is major arterials, like 320th
Yes.
or, yeah. Okay, so for litter pick, I've always thought, I know we've talked about this in the past, Chair Dobie, about having volunteers doing some of the work. For example, having volunteer organizations adopting a portion of a road or a park, or, I don't know if that's still something we're talking about, or be,
So Council President, we've looked at that a number of times over the years. The city in 2000, I don't know if it was 2007 or 2008, eliminated the volunteer coordinator position, which ran the program you're talking about.
Yeah.
Since then, there hasn't really been the bandwidth or capacity to stand something else like that up. Most of the programs that you see for Adopt a Highway, for example, even at a city level, the sponsors of those roads are not actually performing the work with volunteers or themselves. They're effectively paying for that work to be done. So certainly there's an advantage to having, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, whatever the case may be, sponsoring a road and paying for the litter pick. But that all boils back down to the time and resources for someone to coordinate that.
yeah, and I think at some point we were talking about having that as part of the municipal court.
We did. Judge Larson proposed, I don't remember exactly how that was intended to be structured, but he proposed a position within the municipal court that coordinated that. There was some concern about what level of offender and community service would be doing the work, and that never really got off the ground to my knowledge. But yes, courts was looking at a program.
I guess I'd be curious to know if any other cities our size have that kind of a program going.
There are a couple that use the court system. There are a couple that pay to have the King County Jail do that work as well. We have a program through the Parks Department with the Department of Corrections at the state level that they are using. But beyond that, we, as a city, have not really dove into that too much.
No, I meant other cities our size that they
So-
contract with them, but.
Sure, so Everett and Linwood both do it.
In-house
For example.
programs.
They have someone, I believe, I want to say both of them are in their police department, but they both have someone that, yes, deals with coordination of community service through sentencing.
Well, I'm wondering if that would be anything that would save us money in the long run.
I can certainly talk to Judge Larson or the chief about it. I don't know the answer to
Yeah, I'd be interested
that.
in looking at that again. I'm amazed at the amount of litter there is. And just looking at the numbers here, it's astounding.
Yeah, so I mean, most of the work that Mackmore is doing is mowing. It's not
It's
litter
mow-
pick.
it's litter.
They empty the trash cans as they go down, but most of the work they're doing is picking weeds and mowing. It's not litter pick.
So Chair Dobie, is that something you can put on a future agenda?
Sure.
Just to have a review?
You
Have
want
it
to
in-
have it in this year or wait until next
Probably in the
year?
beginning of next year.
Okay,
There's
we'll move it.
nothing we could do this year anyway.
We'll make a note of that, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion or?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward the proposed contract amendment to the October 17, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Excuse me, now we're going to talk about establishing the time of payment, interest, and penalties to be imposed on delinquent annual special assessments for Lake Management District Number 1 for Steel Lake. This has got lots of press time and pictures in a boat and all sorts of fun stuff.
Got that right.
Did you get to go out in the boat?
No, that was my supervisor.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Yeah, you get to tell us about what we're going to do. Thank you.
Cool. So, I'm Dan Sternkoff with the Public Works Department. Here to present about this ordinance related to the Steel Lake Management District on their delinquent assessments. So the policy question is, should council adopt an ordinance establishing the time of payment, interest, and penalties to be imposed on delinquent annual special assessments for Steel Lake Management District? So this is a lot of text here. It's more just the LMD renewal process to date. I think the main thing would be on this slide here. The most recent thing that was passed was on the September 19th council meeting, there was a public hearing on the proposed assessment roll, and a resolution was passed confirming and approving that special assessment roll. So annual assessments, they're billed through King County, through the King County Assessor. All property owners within the established boundary of the LMD pay an assessment based on their property type. And the annual revenue allows for continuous funding of short and long-term lake management activities. And so delinquent assessments, basically if the assessment isn't paid by May 10th of each year, it becomes delinquent, and they're subject to a 1% per month interest. And there's also a penalty of 5% on the assessment, and this is the minimum that's allowed by the RCW that governs this whole LMD structure. And there's also an automatic lien against the property if they go unpaid. And then there's also, if they're unpaid for 3 years, King County can begin a foreclosure proceeding for non-payment. And so the next steps are, basically, we're here today presenting about this ordinance establishing the timeline of payment. There's also going to be another resolution presented later. But the next steps would essentially just be passing that ordinance and then passing this resolution. And then the last one would be appointing an advisory committee. And so the options considered are to forward the proposed ordinance to first reading at the October 17th council meeting, or to not to adopt the proposed ordinance and provide staff direction. And the mayor recommends option number 1. Any questions?
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. I believe all of council got an email last week from a resident who lives on Steel Lake, and I think he might have gotten it too. And one of her questions is that residents are questioning paying for the lake assessment when they feel that that the lake might not be managed correctly. So if somebody were to withhold their payment because or their assessment because they're concerned with the management of the lake and what they see on the lake, what would the city do? Would King County then fine them? Or-
Yeah, in the past, like, King County will reach out to the city with a list of delinquents, and then we'll send reminder letters, basically, and then if they choose not to pay, I'm actually not sure how that would be.
I guess if your question is whether it matters why they're delinquent in payment in terms of
Correct.
interest and stuff, the answer is no, it doesn't matter. Regardless of the reason for the delinquency, it's still a lien, the interest still accrues, all of those provisions still accrue.
So I understand that the Lake Management District Committee members are the ones who hire the consultant who goes out into the lake and determines what they're going to treat and what they're not going to treat. And the city doesn't have anything to do with that.
If you're trying to ask how that citizen could have their voice heard in terms of the management of the district, I think the answer is to comment at the advisory committee meetings and to put in public comment the same way that somebody would comment in one of
Okay.
these public meetings.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we are also, I guess, getting ahead of ourselves, we are opening appointments for the advisory committee as well later this year, so they could also try to be on the committee itself.
Councilmember Walsh?
Yeah, so this tax is just paid as part of the regular King County tax assessment, correct?
Yeah,
Okay, all right. And so if they have a mortgage or whatever, typically it'll be collected by the mortgage company and just, so, okay, all right, thank you.
Do you have a idea what the average assessment will be per piece of property?
yeah, just off the top of my head, I know that a single family is like $95, multifamily is like around $200 or $300, and then vacant is like $33, and then there's like a special fee for the boat launch that's owned by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and that's like over $3,000, and then there's also a fee that gets paid by the Parks Department for the waterfront, for the beach swimming area, that's like around like 2,000 and change. basically.
So it's a very small number we're talking about.
The total
collective-
assessment is around $15,000 and change.
That's when everybody pays.
Yeah, like that total annual amount
Yeah.
collected by the.
It's probably going to cost more to collect the 1% and the 5% and the 3-year foreclosure over a couple $100 bill, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I forgot to ask a question. So since we've been going through this process of re-upping this lake management district, were assessments paid in May of 2023?
Yeah, there were assessments paid, but there also were delinquent
Okay.
properties as well.
And that fell under the old agreement? Or whatever?
Yeah,
Okay.
that term, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, yes,
So
Council President.
Part of the problem is, some of the people feel that they're not getting their money's worth. In other words, the lake isn't being fixed. So what do we do about that?
I would say, I mean, it's like they were mentioning, it's on the LMD Advisory Committee to make decisions based on the lake. As far as we as a city, specifically, we can only, at least my understanding is that I can only provide staff support in like administrative staff support, like creating meeting minutes and agendas and stuff like that. We can make decisions on, oh, you need to treat this, you're using the wrong treatment techniques. That's something beyond the scope of the city's responsibility, as I understand, as it pertains to LMD.
Yeah,
So at some point, if the consultant that they're hiring isn't doing the appropriate job, what do we do about that?
So the LMD, just as the city does, the LMD can direct that go out for a request for qualifications, and anybody can bid on it if they don't want to continue using the same company. So we could certainly do, that is something we could do next year if that was the direction of the LMD.
And the other thing I'm concerned about is that around the swimming area are the, I don't know, it's algae or what, with the long roots. And I know that some of the kids they drown because of getting caught up in those.
So the lake, and kind of to what you're getting to, Council President, from the direction of the last council meeting, is on for a agenda item for tomorrow night's meeting for a more in-depth briefing with pictures and maps and everything to cover that, as well as a couple other topics that council brought up. So if you're in agreement, I'd like to punt that to tomorrow night's
tomorrow's
meeting.
fine. Thanks.
I guess I have one comment. We're in the process of setting up this district, or that these people on the lake are going to vote for who their representatives are, and they're going to make the business decision, just like a homeowners association. If they need $100,000, they're going to have to assess everybody on the lake to clean it up, if that's what is the consensus of that committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we as a city are setting it up so they have the ability to be like an HOA and make the maintenance decisions, because it's not our decision.
So if they want to change the assessment, they would have to, I'm not sure what a parallel example would be, but where it diverges a little bit from an HOA is they would have to make a recommendation to council to change the assessed value.
Right.
And then the council, to get the county to actually enact it, the city council would actually have to approve changing the amount. So the LMD does not have lateral authority to change the assessment value. That is something they would have to take action on first, and then city council would second. So there is a little bit of a checks and balances in that if they came back and said, we want to spend 150 grand, to your point, or 100 grand, and the residents were in opposition to that, speaking to council members, council could say no, and the assessment would not change. However, once the assessment value is set, the expenditure of those funds is solely at the discretion of the LMD.
But the question that just came up was, and what I heard is, we're setting up a fund of about $15,000, which is not going to fix anything other than the
So that is.
mundane, small things, and set the infrastructure up. So if people are sending emails to us saying, fix the lake because you have this, there is no funding mechanism other than the $15,000 to do anything.
So correct, and that is on par with the same values of the other two LMDs that are operational within the city. That's similar to the LMDs in Auburn and the surrounding jurisdictions as well, as far as the funding level goes. It does historically pay for 2 to 3 chemical treatments per year to control this. Certainly if it's a really hot summer and there's algae blooms, algae is kind of a separate entity from weeds, and they're kind of independent. It doesn't do anything to that, to your point, if they wanted to treat for that. But historically, it does cover treatment of invasive species.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Honda?
Do all lakes in King County have a lake management district?
No, most do not. So that is something that is petitioned by residents to the governing agency locally under state law. So if it's within a city, that would go to the city. If it's an unincorporated King County or Pierce County or wherever, it would go to the county commissioners. But it takes the citizens initiating that. And then ultimately, you know, if there's agreement and consensus that gets stood up, out of all the lakes in Federal Way, we have 3 LMDs. So, and there's a lot more than 3 lakes.
So what is the benefit of having a lake management district is collecting the money to, or having control over your lake that you live on?
I'd say it's control of the lake more than collecting the fees. So all lakes within the state are waters of the state by state law. So, you know, they fall under state jurisdiction. The Department of Ecology will address perverse invasive weeds, but not anything kind of at what a level that a resident would want. That's like completely overgrown. You can walk across the lake level. So if the community has a desire to fund and wants a higher service level, standard, whatever the case may be, prettier lake, cleaner water for them to swim in, whatever it is, there's a provision in state law that the residents can enable an LMD to take action beyond what the state is willing to take. That's where how LMDs work gets a little bit fuzzy compared to like the Planning Commission, for example, where, you know, council is the final say over Planning Commission, whereas with an LMD, since they're actually governing waters of the state, not waters of the city, we don't have that authority, which is kind of that, call it a fine level of
Okay.
detail, but fundamentally that's the difference.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Walsh?
So if the residents wanted to disband the LMD, they could petition to do that as well then?
So the first step of this process was actually a petition to reform the district. So as it pertains to this specific process, many months ago, a majority of the landowners surrounding this lake petitioned to reform it. So there's already been a majority vote of affected landowners that's triggered this process in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
Chair Rovey, I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on October 17, 2023.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we're on to item F, renewing the Lake Management District Number 1 Advisory Committee for Steel Lake and establishing the duties thereof.
Round 2. So the policy question for this one is, should council approve a resolution creating an advisory committee for the Steel Lake Management District Number 1 and establishing the duties thereof? So the advisory committee structure, it's made up of 7 members. There's 4 residential property owners that could be single-family developed or vacant. There's 1 representative from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's 1 representative from City Parks Department, 1 from multifamily property. And the terms are 2 years, except for the public properties. And at the bottom there, city staff provides administrative support to the LMDs as well, advisory committee. So the purpose of the advisory committee is to help develop a work plan, annual work plan, to provide implementation or input on a work plan implementation, develop educational materials, assist with the preparation of the annual report, and also conduct outreach to district members, basically people living around the lake. And so, advisory committee appointment, basically following the approval of this resolution, letters will be sent out to all property owners within the district to solicit applications for this advisory committee. And then staff will review all the applications for eligibility, and then we'll bring that list before council for appointment for the open recruitment period. And then, next steps, like I was mentioning during the last presentation, basically have going to present the first reading of this ordinance, or the ordinance, to city council at the next meeting, pass this resolution, and then have a second reading of the ordinance at the November 8th one, and then during December of 2023, it'll be the appointment of the advisory committee. And so the options considered are to approve this resolution, creating an advisory committee for the Steele Lake Management District, or not to approve this resolution and to provide staff direction. And the mayor recommends option 1.
Any questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
I move to forward the proposed resolution to the October 17, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. And now we're going to talk about item G, the 288th Road Diet Phase 1 King County Metro Interlocal Agreement. Sounds like a fun one.
All right, so this is for the South 288th Street Road Diet Phase 1 King County Metro Interagency Agreement. Okay. Policy question, should the city council enter into an interagency agreement with King County Metro to have them pay for construction of bus stop improvements to the city's 288th Street Road Diet Phase Project, Phase 1? This is the location of South 288th where Phase 1 is being occurred. We're actually in construction right now. These are the location of the 2 bus stops just east of 28th Place South, right next to Camelot Drive. We started in August 28th. We are waiting to do the bus improvements until we get this passed. Improving bus stops was included in the budgeted scope of the road diet. The agreement will allow us to be reimbursed $16,428.66 for the bus stops we are going to construct. The 2 options we have are approve the proposed interagency agreement, which is the mayor's recommendation, or do not approve the proposed interagency agreement and provide direction to staff. Is there any questions?
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. I thought I heard last week that this project was on hold or slowing down because of the lack of REAP money. Was this not on the list?
No, that's the next phase of this project. This project has multiple phases to it. So
So-
the construction of phase 1 now is not impacted in that conversation.
So then phase 2, it.
Phase
will be
2 is
impacted.
in design right now, so we will coordinate the REIT revenue to the bidding of that project. You are correct on that.
Thank you.
So, my question, Councilmember McDaniel.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd question, but my question is why? I'm just curious to know why they're willing to pick up the bill on this particular item, unless I missed something.
Yeah, I mean, the buses are King County Metro's jurisdiction, so they want to improve their bus stops in the area. So it just makes sense for us to do it while our contractor's already out there, and, it'll be cheaper for them instead of having someone else come out later and, because they don't have to mobilize a brand-new contractor to go out there and make these bus stops.
Okay, interesting.
My question is, I'm almost surprised that a bus stop's only, or 2 of them's only $16,000.
Yeah, I mean, they're just
Is that
basically
really the-
thicker reinforced concrete.
Are we putting up
that-
bamboo, or are we putting up something that actually will last? Well, that seems really cheap.
There's not much to them.
Okay.
Basically just thicken the sidewalk with some rebar in there.
We putting something over the top so people don't get wet when they're waiting?
No, we're
No.
putting in like footing so they can come in and install that later if they want.
Yeah, so we coordinate with them and so they fabricate those shelters themselves, King County does. So we put in more or less the foundation for them. So, and that may be some of your point to the price. They come in and drop them in after construction's done.
And that's in the contract, they're actually going to do that?
They have the ability to.
Well, no-
The contract does not require them to, no.
So they're going to pay us, or we're going to do this 16,000, or do whatever we do, the curb cut, or get it ready.
So it's a wider sidewalk, so
Yeah.
it's unlike the ones on 320th where the sidewalk is, 12 to 15 feet, and there's kind of room to have these. These sidewalks are a little bit narrower.
Okay.
So it kind of provides call it a bump out in the sidewalk to allow for the shelters to be put in,
So really what we're doing is making it bus stop ready.
pretty much.
And if we keep saying bus stop, I would assume we're having a bus stop with maybe those benches people try to sit on and a roof on it. But
Yeah,
really all we're doing is making it ready for someone to spend money later to put something on it.
Yeah, it's really, bus pads should be what
Okay,
we,
maybe we should change it instead of, I don't know. I guess it's a bus stop because the bus stops there.
Yeah.
But it's nothing that any of us we'd drive by and
it's
go,
also
what did we just do?
It's
We have
also the
a bus
boilerplate
pad.
agreement from King County to do these.
Yeah, we have a
So
bus
it's
pad.
Yeah, it's the name directly off the boilerplate agreement.
Okay.
So it's,
I agree with you. When I hear bus stop, that's.
Yeah, I'm thinking of something that
yeah,
people
fair,
would,
fair point.
yeah. Okay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward the proposed interlocal agreement to the October 17, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 thank you.
Okay, Mr. Niven, a development agreement code amendments. And then you're gonna go right into information. So you got, let's see, Seahawks haven't made it to the 50-yard line yet, right?
We're gonna get through this.
No.
Jamal Adams is already out, though.
What's that?
Jamal Adams is already out with an injury.
Oh, I thought he just came back.
For those of us that are taping the game, it'd be helpful not to share too much more. Thank you. Loving it right now. All right, so this evening we have some revisions to 1985 for you guys. As we are starting to talk about potentially executing some development agreements, we're talking about TC3, we were talking about Kids Corner, we have one for Wild Waves as well that's in the queue. The Assistant City Attorney and I looked at the existing chapter and saw that we had some changes we'd like to make before that next kind of wave of development agreements move through, so that's what you're getting this evening. This is city initiated. So what's in the ordinance? 1985-010, add language to clarify that the purpose includes greater predictability and flexibility to the developer, and that for all code departures, there's a benefit given to the city. So we wanted to be clear that there was a ledger here, and for every deviation they ask for, there really should be something that the city gets for granting those deviations. 1985-020, add the minimum requirement of 5 acres and not predominantly single family. Part of this was trying to narrow the scope of what we would actually do a development agreement for. And there's other examples from other cities where there's a certain geography that it has to be a certain size of property or properties for us to go through the work that it takes to actually negotiate these. And then we also thought that it didn't make sense to do one that was predominantly single family in nature, because that's a subdivision plat, and it really shouldn't be looking for a lot of deviations. 1985-020, where a comprehensive plan amendment is required with a development agreement. This does happen from time to time. The comprehensive plan amendment must be decided by the council at least one meeting prior to the development agreement if it was related to Chapter 3, which is transportation. The reason for this very specific provision is our transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan has a lot of technical data in it. And one of the things that we felt was important was for the council to first think about whether changing whatever technical detail there is in Chapter 3 first, and then looking at the development agreement after, and not doing it kind of flip-flopped. That's a technical term. 1985-030, development agreement can modify city regulations. Being specific about that, it really wasn't specific prior to this proposed amendment. Also in 030, a development agreement can vest traffic impact fees to those in effect at the time of execution of the development agreement for 10 years, subject to CPI inflation. One of the things we heard from a number of developers was that the lack of predictability is something that causes them, especially on a bigger project, it's difficult for them to make commitments if they don't have some surety that prices are going to be somewhere that they understand. And so this was kind of a compromise that the city and a couple of the developers kind of landed on. 1985-030, development agreement cannot modify transportation concurrency requirements. If you guys want to talk about that one, we can. That one's fairly complicated. 198.85, that should be 1985-040. Development agreement may be initiated by the city council, council committee, or the mayor. If the mayor, then public noticing requirements are triggered. So this was one of the suggestions from Merlone Geyer, was to add the mayor to make it just the starting of the development agreement not have to go to council. And nothing wrong with going to council, but that generally adds a couple months on the front end to go through a committee and then a council process. And then the planning commission felt that if the mayor was going to initiate a development agreement, that there should be some public noticing so the community could be advised of that. So we added that in. We were in agreement with that suggestion. So public comment, again, we got written comment from Merlone Geyer on September 20th. They wanted to, they didn't like either of the traffic provisions, either the fact that traffic impact fees would only be set for 10 years. They thought that it should be for longer, since more complicated development agreements can be 20 or 30 years long. The second one was they did not want the code to preclude negotiations of transportation concurrency. They thought the city should leave that door open. And then they did suggest that the DAs be allowed to be initiated by the mayor and the CD director, and I humbly say it should not be me, because I shouldn't commit other city department staff to work on a development agreement. That should come from the mayor if it's coming from someone other than the city council. And then Grand Peaks also had a suggestion on the when the development agreement is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, and they made some suggestions. And I think where we landed with the language that's in the draft ordinance is consistent with the suggestion from Grand Peaks. We received no in-person comments. So decision criteria, this is all in your staff report. This is out of code. Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed code amendments, and the mayor's recommendation is to approve option 1, which is approve the ordinance, send the ordinance to council. Any questions?
Councilmember Walsh?
Okay, the complicated part, concurrency.
Yes.
What, want to, as in a brief and uncomplicated way as possible?
I will start, and I will definitely invite EJ and or Kent to weigh in. So for concurrency, my understanding of the way it works is you guys adopt levels of service within the city. And a development, when it comes through, has to run a concurrency analysis to basically see if it's going to push any of those triggered intersections or points that we study to a lower level of service. If the answer is yes, so let's assume an area goes from a level of service C down to a D, or a D to an E, or something of that sort. If you were to allow a developer not to have to fix that, then either one, the council would have to change its level of service, or would have to pay for doing that itself. That's my understanding. And EJ, if you want to jump in, feel free, please.
So there's a couple more layers to that. In general, that's correct, with the giant caveat of there are large swaths of the city where the council does not have sole authority to change level of service. 320th, 348th, Enchanted, Dash Point Road are all examples of that, where WashDOT actually has to concur with us, and we are already at the floor of the minimum level that we can be at. So most of the time, it's not as simple as the council saying, we want to change that. We don't actually have the authority to do so. We've already reduced it to the minimum level that we are allowed to reduce it to. The other big point with this conversation is there's been a longstanding council policy that we do not vest to concurrency going back to the late 90s. And that was put in place to effectively prevent a developer, not to use any of these names that Keith is using, but to prevent a developer that comes in and says, hey, I want to vest, I want to there's enough capacity in the system today for my 30-acre development, and I want 30 years or 40 years to build out that development. And then they take 30 or 40 years, and then another developer comes in next door, and they've already taken all the capacity. And then developer 2 comes in and says, well, hey, I want to crank this development out in 2 years. And we say, sorry, we've already given that capacity to developer 1, who isn't going to use it for 30 years, but we actually can't approve your project that you want to do within the next 2 years. So the city policy has been for 25 years that we do not vest to concurrency. It is first in, first out as far as permitting goes. There is strong opinions on my staff, myself included, and professional opinions that is a very key thing to the way we manage the traffic system in the city, that there is significant opposition to changing that at a staff level. And that's kind of how we landed on where we are. All this is doing is codifying what we've been doing for 30 years, frankly. So that's kind of where, certainly if you are a large property owner in the downtown and you're looking at this, I certainly understand where there's some mentality of saying, hey, I want to absorb every piece of capacity that I can, invest to that. That way I have flexibility 20, 30 years from now associated with my property. That kind of prohibits other developers within the core, though.
And just on a slightly different note, an important thing to realize here is that our code already has a ton of regulations that relate to concurrency. All this does is it makes it so that we cannot change those code requirements as part of a development agreement.
Can we go back to the slide that addresses that to see just how it reads?
Yes, as soon as I find it. So it's probably, I mean, this is a summary.
On the side or the bottom?
You need to look at the ordinance that's in the packet for the exact language, but it basically in 1985-030, we're basically saying that the development agreement, and I can read that out of the ordinance.
I've got it, Keith, if you want me
Okay.
to read it.
Go ahead.
It specifically says, a development agreement shall not modify or waive the provisions of the Transportation Concurrency Management Chapter of Code.
Okay, all right.
Councilman McDaniel?
I have a different question on, I don't know if it's part of your section here, but in the ordinance itself, I just want to get some clarification. 19.85.010, it's the first section under purpose. It has maybe used at the city's council discretion. Now it's just city's discretion. Is that in lieu of the 19.85.040 where the mayor now has the ability to, is that just, is the purpose to speed up the process, or what was the reasoning behind that?
So I think allowing, so right now, it's council or council committee, which is really kind of the same thing to some extent. By pulling it apart and allowing the mayor to initiate a development agreement, it's streamlining the permitting process by maybe a month or 2 months, depending on the timing. So it's really an efficiency piece for the city and for the applicant. A lot less paperwork for us up front, and it moves it along faster.
And I do want to emphasize that this does not change the fact that the city council is the ultimate body that has the only body with authority to approve the development agreement. The mayor can't do that, even under the proposed changes. That has to be done by city council. The proposed changes would just allow the mayor to start the process, start the negotiation process between city staff and the developer on a development agreement.
Just priming the pump sooner.
Exactly. Otherwise, under the current code, the only way to do that is to get either LUTC or another council committee or city council to officially give the thumbs up with an agenda item that gets approved to start the negotiation process.
Gotcha. And then, so when it says cities, that's literally just the mayor's office for the most part?
Correct. The reason for that textual change was to make clear that it could be initiated by the mayor.
Gotcha. Is there a certain size that these fall into for projects, or, I mean, I don't see like small.
5 acres.
So,
what it was?
I have done a development agreement that was very small in a previous city I worked for, and it was really surrounding a partnering on the purchase and construction of a traffic signal, where the city and the developer basically figured out a way to move a project forward and share the costs of a traffic signal. So it can be little, but generally, because of the complexity, they tend to be pretty big in size. You know, our permitting fee, because of the amount of staff time it takes, our permitting fee for a development agreement is $30,000. So you don't just kind of wake up and say, you know, I want to do a development agreement today and write a $30,000 check. So generally, there tend to be at least medium-sized or bigger projects.
Understood, thank you.
So I have a question. I personally don't like the change, what it says, city council, committee, or mayor. I think the mayor should be out of it and not be part of it. And we're talking about speeding things up, but in the life of these projects, over all the years I've sat up here, we've had people say, hey, it's not fast enough, but it hasn't been that big of a deal. And when you take the executive, personal opinion, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but if you take the executive of the city and now put them in a position where they can start a development agreement, it just doesn't feel right to me. We've gone forever the way we do it, where it comes through land use, or comes through council members, or comes through the committees, and then the mayor's over there doing his job, running the business, and we're doing our job legislating and working with everyone. So I really don't want to vote for that. I mean, I would strike that. To me, that's opening Pandora's box.
So I'm going to speak for
But you can argue, because
No, no,
you're the one
so-
presenting.
So let me speak for myself. You know, generally speaking, I always plan that it takes about a year to get a development agreement, because they are complicated and there's a lot of back and forth. You know, if it takes an extra month to get it off the ground and start rolling, I don't know. This is not that important to me. This was a public comment that we were being responsive to from Merlone Geyer. And ultimately, the commission also kind of choked on it a little bit and added well, if there's public notice, then maybe it's okay. But I'm not wed to that particular edit. If the committee feels like they want to drop that, I'd say let's drop it and move on.
And the one comment I'd say, just to add context, is that I know that there, in the context of a currently in process development agreement amendment that we're doing for Wild Waves specifically, there was comment from the developer and their counsel that the process for initiating that seemed overly cumbersome.
But cumbersome isn't always bad.
Definitely not.
I mean, you know, we're here for the long haul, not for today. And if it's cumbersome, that means at least we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's, and not going to get one of those things where we say, whoops, we should have done it differently.
Cumbersome also often means well thought out.
Yeah. Councilmember McDaniel, you have a?
Just out of curiosity, how would that amendment go then? How would it be a motion? I'm looking for educational purposes.
Sure. So under current code, so I'll tell you what currently is the case, what's proposed, and then try to answer your question with a combination of those things. Currently under code, absent some very, very, very minor changes to a development agreement plan, you essentially have to follow the full original DA process for any amendments. So that's currently the case under code. One thing that's being added as part of this ordinance is something that makes clear that the development agreement itself can specify the way and the process by which it can be amended. So what you might see in the future is development agreements that are more liberal in terms of being able to be amended more easily than what current code would allow. But essentially, under current code, the short answer to your question is you have to go through the entire process for an amendment as you would for an entirely new DA. So you need to get either council committee or council to bless the thumbs up to start negotiating the amendment. You'd go through the amendment, and then ultimately it would be up to council whether to approve it or not.
And if Councilmember Dovey, now to make the change he wants, would that just be, I make a motion to scratch that, or how would that part work too?
No, I think he would just change the motion that's on the agenda bill So he could basically say, I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on October 17th, striking the provision where the mayor is allowed to initiate a development agreement.
Yep.
And we would fix the code, assuming the committee majority agreed with that, we would then fix the ordinance before it gets to council for first reading.
Awesome, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Walsh?
What do other cities do? Are there other cities that have it so that the mayor can initiate it or not?
There are, but I would say it's the minority.
And have they, do we know if there's been any problems with that?
So,
cities where it is done.
let's talk, can I pivot your question a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you. So by allowing the council to weigh in at the beginning, it allows for the council to have a conversation about the policy implications of the proposed development agreement. You know, is that something we might want there? You know, talk about it at a very high level. The mayor, because the mayor is the CEO of the administration, the mayor controls our time, right? So I could argue that the mayor knows if he's got staff resources to work on negotiating a development agreement or not. Typically, when it comes to council, it comes to council with the mayor's recommendation, either to yes or no, right? So you're getting that. It's just coming to you guys. And like I said, I think the value of it coming to you guys as that part of that initial phase is if for some reason you don't like the idea. Let's say the development agreement includes the rezone of some area from single family to multifamily, and you guys just say, you know, that's not going to happen. Rather than us spending a year negotiating something that's just going to be dead on arrival when it gets to council, you can make it dead on arrival on day one, which saves us a year of work in futile. So that's the value. And I don't know if I answered your question, council member, but that would be how I would
Yeah, thank
structure
you.
that.
Thank you for those insights. It is appreciated.
Any other questions? I'll just make one comment. I would want to move this forward, but with the caveat that we take the mayor out of the equation on the front end. Okay. Do you like or you had the wordings.
Okay, so, let me take a crack at this. I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on October 17, 2023.
Striking the
Strike.
provisions for the mayor to initiate a development agreement.
Okay, here we
Yeah.
go. You said it.
So moved?
Yeah.
So moved.
You got that, striking 198.88500 for the word "or mayor."
The provisions allowing the mayor to initiate it, yes.
And the second.
Okay, it's been moved and created and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about Community Space Advisory Group recommendations. It says information only, but we could move it to action. Is that possible?
There is all sorts of pathways this could go. So
Not tonight is the
Not
short
tonight?
answer to that, since it wasn't listed as action.
that's why I bring my attorney.
Okay. So if we really like it, then we have to say, we like it, bring it back.
It-
The-
Yeah, you could put it directly on the council.
We could put it on
agenda,
directly
too.
on the agenda
Yeah.
for action. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just no action tonight
No
specifically.
action tonight. This is for information. It's got a great starting screen. I like that.
Thank you. So let's see where this conversation goes, and then we'll see where we want to take it. So back in May, the mayor organized a group of residents and people that did business in our community, as well as some that ran some recreational programs, to basically try to get a broad group of folks together to talk about whether or not the city should explore a community space and/or a city hall in our downtown. And so there was over 25 people that were invited to be part of this conversation, and really we were asking two questions. One is, should the city include a large indoor community space as part of the redevelopment of downtown? And the second is, should the city consider relocating City Hall to downtown? Fairly simple, but very big questions for this city to, I think, ponder at this point in our life. So we received, through this process, we ended up receiving 3 sets of public comments, one from the public market, and their points were, if City Hall moves, their suggestion was to not put it on TC3, to include a community space with the Trent project, which is TC3, sorry for the mixing of nomenclature, to pursue a request for proposals for the community space. So, you know, one of the things we talked about as a group was, if there was this community space, who gets to use it, and how do we make that decision? And part of the conversation, I think, that naturally happened between staff and the community space advisory group was, you know, probably putting together a request for proposals, because that way you kind of advertise it out and you can see who's out there, who's interested, and it could be a number of different entities, ones that are social oriented, ones that are more economic oriented, ones that, you know, provide a service to the community, and so there needed to be a whole separate process for that. And then the fourth recommendation was that the community space should promote the economy or economic development in our city. The Chamber of Commerce also provided a comment for us, and they were adamant that moving City Hall downtown was important for both the downtown businesses and the growth. It would serve as a catalyst for others investing in our downtown. And then just a couple of residents, James and Tony Kim. Number 1, moving City Hall needs to be a top priority. Number 2, they want to know where the funds are coming from, and so do I. That is a question that is still on the table, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then number 3 is the new City Hall should not be more than 10% of the building space on TC3. I'm not sure how they came up with that metric, but that was in the public comments. So with that, the recommendation from the Community Space Advisory Group is broken into 2 pieces. First, the community space, and incorporate language in the TC3 development agreement that would allow for the construction of a 40,000 square foot plus or minus community space. Number 2, utilize an RFP to determine the use of that space. And number 3, prioritize efforts to fund this space. The City Hall, incorporate language in the TC3 development agreement that would allow for construction of a new City Hall, and engage a space planner to determine the appropriate size of the space needed for that City Hall. Right now, we know we got 83,000 square feet here, and really, if you were going to invest in a new city facility, you would want it to make sure it could accommodate the city's growth for the next 50 years. So what I can tell you is next steps. For 2023, this year, we are going to provide language in the TC3 development agreement that would allow for the construction of the community space in a City Hall. And the way that we're framing that, at least at this point, and obviously your guys' opinions are very important, is to basically say that the city has 5 years to make this decision on whether or not to include a City Hall and or a community space in the TC3 development project. If so, then we'll figure out how to pay for it, and we make the appropriate agreements with Trent, and they go ahead and build it, and it ends up being there. If we can't figure out how to pay for it, then it doesn't happen, those building pads would end up being other uses on TC3. And then for 24 to 26, so after we get past this year, what we need to do is we need to amend the capital facilities plan in the city's comprehensive plan to include both a City Hall and a community space. Right now, they're not in there, and they need to be in there. Even if this is something we don't build for the next 10 years, those facilities should be in that plan, because they're both, I think they're both needed, and we can go through that if we want to. Number 2, we should contract with a professional to determine the size of new City Hall. Number 3, we should explore ideas on selling this building, because if ultimately we're going to have a new city hall, this building is basically a surplus city asset, and we should explore some creative ways on how we can potentially maximize the revenue that we would get for disposing of this property. And then part of, the last part of this is to really watch the tax increment financing revenue generation. If we give ourselves 5 years, we will hopefully see some properties start to redevelop within the next 5 years. The light rail station will be open, and hopefully there will be some corresponding development that'll be either built, under construction, or in the pipe. And those will help let us sync with the forecasts that were done by Tiberius Solutions. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I left off the end of this slide with anything missing. Is there anything that we haven't thought of that we need to either add to the next steps, or put somewhere else if it's maybe not appropriate for here?
Well, I have one comment. On your next steps 2023, I would prioritize community space number 1, city hall number 2. Because if you're only going to be able to do one, or the council has to decide if this is what we're going to do and we only do one, which one are we going to do? I tend to believe the community space is more important than the city hall, although the city hall could be very, very important. But if we don't set the priority, then you're just running down the road, and you're going to have to face that sometime. And I guess I'd also make clear that this is the roadmap of, like you say, the next 50 years. We're basically taking an option out to do something that we're committed to, but we haven't figured out how to fund it, so it could all fall apart.
Right.
Okay.
But you have to start
Well,
somewhere.
yeah, I'm willing to start. I just want some clarity if we're starting, what's number 1 and what's number 2.
Sure.
And then make it really, really clear that if we don't have the funding in 5 years, or this council, whoever's sitting up here decides, no, we want to stay here because we really like these little things, that says, is the mic on? That's,
Yeah,
but you have to negotiate it in the development agreement now, or you'll never get it in.
right. And yes,
Okay.
agreed.
I had a couple questions. How big was this building? Was it
83.
82,000?
Yes.
And then the add-on that you had on the little diagram was an extra 40,000?
Yes.
So if we were to go to downtown, we're looking at 120-ish or
So,
more?
Yeah, that's my ballpark. I think we would need to hire a space planner to actually kind of figure out, talk to each department director, find out, what their growth plans should be over the next, few decades, and then plan the space accordingly. There's certain requirements that PD would want that they don't have in this building. Having talked to the chief, I know of those. So, making sure all of those are incorporated into the space plan so that, we know how big it is and how it needs to flow.
Gotcha. And then your number 1 on the 24 to 26 is pretty much determining what a potential budget would be, most likely, just to have a number to play with?
Yes, so those, by adding those in, there would need to be a guesstimate on value.
Gotcha, thank you. Oh, do we actually have a guesstimate of what the value of this place would be, potentially, or? Paid for, I know.
I actually don't. Obviously, we're in a funky place with office space and surplus office space right now, given the pandemic and remote work and all of that makes it a little bit more complicated. So we would need to, I think, do some strategizing on how best to kind of list this at the end of the day.
Gotcha, thank you.
Councilmember Walsh?
Yeah.
Then,
Kind of going along what Chairman Dovey said, I think that the language, the community space, I think that is a given. That should be regardless. With City Hall, I believe that we should be moving City Hall down there. However, the funding part, and whether that funding works out, that's a big question mark. And so with community space, I don't think there's too big of a question mark there. And so that needs to be number one. The city hall, I agree, that should be number two, and with that, there's a question mark as far as funding goes. And, you know, and having that 5-year plan in there, hopefully within 5 years, we'd be able to determine funding, see how everything's going, and hopefully be able to say, yeah, but more time with that. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Council President Kochmar?
Well, thank you. I've already talked to you, Keith, about what I believe in. As far as, a lot of this has to do with the maintenance facility and what that's going to cost, because that's going to affect what kind of money we have for this kind of a thing. So I know we have a lot of swim money for that, but it's not all being used. So I guess, when will we know the amount that's really going to cost, that maintenance facility?
I'm going to look at EJ, if you want to weigh in on that.
Call a friend?
It should be going out to bid in January, February of next year, so a couple months after that. I mean, as of everything we've heard so far from the architect, it's on budget with what council's previously told us to move ahead with. So that's 42 total, including land ac. But I mean, frankly, the truth is in the bidding. So.
And in the construction, because I don't know how many.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you are 100% right.
We have a change order coming up here.
Hopefully not,
100%.
but you are absolutely correct. But I think we will have a more comfortable answer probably summer of next year once the project is bid.
Thank you. So is there anything that the developer is saying with regard to City Hall being part of his belief that should be the anchor for his development?
So I saw an updated potential site plan today. The way that it looks and sorry for you all that don't know this plan by heart. So the PAC is in the southwest corner. Then there'll be a big civic plaza immediately east of that, and then a residential building, and then another residential building, and the northwest corner of the property actually probably is going to have some of the best views of Mount Rainier. So having kind of the PAC and then a city hall as basically the west end of that block makes the whole block actually feel very complete. And so, there's also, we've been having some other conversations about trying to figure out how to, reduce our costs overall. And so there's maybe some other properties that might come into the mix in this conversation. But I think, so the developer thinks that the city hall and the PAC are good anchors for the property. They will provide that daytime tenant and use that a non-residential building will have to kind of balance out the residential and the rest of the property.
So I guess my real question was, it's not going to, if we don't move forward, that's not going to affect his plans?
If we don't go forward, then that building becomes another residential building.
Okay. My other, Councilmember Dovey sent me an interesting article today on a development in Texas. And I had never considered this before, but when you do the infrastructure for the TIF, for when we do the TIF and we talk about streets and sidewalks and infrastructure, meaning underground appurtenances, to include grease traps, because if we have some restaurants in there, we certainly want to, I never thought of putting that as part of the TIF, but that would be a good idea.
So, the developer, we've had some conversations with them because we've wanted some restaurants in some of those ground floor non-residential spaces, and they have to actually plan for. You either build it with stuff like a commercial hood capability or not. And so they're doing that. That is their plan from the beginning, is to build those buildings with commercial hood capabilities, because they basically stack them all the way up to the roof. And then likewise, they need to have the grease interceptors, if it ends up being restaurant uses.
And one other suggestion, you might talk to the developer about it. I've always thought that we have some beautiful views, and what's the height of the building, the highest building going to be?
Probably 7 stories.
So is there any way you can talk to the developer about including a restaurant, top of the,
We, so so the conversation has been, if we build City Hall, we would want a restaurant on the roof.
of City Hall?
Yeah. Because the problem is that it's the type of construction that you have, Council President. So those residential buildings are basically 2 floors of concrete podium with 5 floors of stick construction above. You can't put a restaurant on top of stick construction. The City Hall will be steel construction, and so you can put a restaurant on top without a problem.
Then we can have the Batman light up there.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Okay, we'll go this way and start down in Paul, and then Susan, and then Tron. Oh, you didn't have yours on. Susan, you're up.
Oh, Tran is before
Oh,
me.
well, I was just coming
Okay,
this
all right.
way, because he's going to make a motion, I'm
Oh,
sure.
okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Well, Keith, first of all, I want to clarify my statement that I made at the meeting, where I mentioned about moving City Hall there, and City Hall could become a tourist attraction, so strike that. But the reason that I really think that we should move City Hall to that location is because, number one, I believe that the staff here basically outgrow the space in this building. Second, I think by moving City Hall to downtown is make it easier for residents to come by to do their business there. The third reason is we can invite all the government offices or agency to be in that very same building so that we can build this one-stop shopping for our people. So that is the reason why 6 years ago when I first got on council, I recommended that we could sell this building and then relocate the City Hall to the new location. So I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. Keith, didn't we at one point talk about City Hall and the community space being in one building with the
Yes.
community space on the lower floors or however that works out?
Yes.
That's still in the scope of discussions?
So the development agreement allows for that. So, you know, that building, whether it's just City Hall, just community space, or a stack of the two, that could happen based on the development agreement language. We could also choose, let's assume that the council, you know, we get our revenue projections and we find that we can afford to build a 20,000 square foot community space and not a 40,000 square foot community space. The council members would have the ability to potentially talk about that, and if that's the decision that we wanted to go with, it could end up being the ground floor non-residential space on a residential building. So there's a lot of different ways to put this puzzle together, Deputy Mayor. Right now, what we're trying to do is write a development agreement that allows for us to have some flexibility over the next 5 years. And the developer so far has been very accommodating in terms of kind of the language we've been wanting to put in the agreement, so.
So, you know, this building, if it were to be sold, because we certainly can't keep it and move downtown, it doesn't have to stay office. I mean, it could be other things, a lot of different other things. So it could be housing, it could be a medical center. I mean, it could be whatever someone wants to make it.
Right.
I don't know, whatever it's zoned for. But it doesn't necessarily have to be office, and I don't think we need, when we're making this decision, trying to decide what we're gonna do with City Hall here or moving it downtown potentially, be worried that people aren't coming back to offices and that this couldn't be sold as an office building, because it may not stay an office building.
Right. There could be higher and better uses for this property than office, absolutely.
So the plaza that we're building, which is in the first phase, hopefully. Is that that's gonna be a covered space?
So not designed yet. So the idea right now, so probably not, because that's a big covered space. It's about an acre in size. And so right now, what at least the vision is that there would probably be some structures as part of the plaza. One of the ideas that's shown up in the plans has been like a bandstand. And then, you know, some potential like, shade structures of some kind. But there will be, right now, the city and the developer have talked about, you know, just landscape architects that would potentially be hired to design the plaza. And we would assume that there would be a public outreach component, an opportunity for the public to weigh in on those designs. So I think the answer is we don't know yet, but it will not likely be a covered, it'll be a true outdoor space.
So not like what Puyallup has, that small building?
So we can put a building, so right now the plans kind of showed a pavilion building on
Right.
the plaza, and we can do that. You know, that's one of those things where, you know, we need to make some decisions in terms of functionality. And if we feel like there might be an advantage to having some indoor-outdoor space, you know, with potentially like garage doors that would roll up and allow it just to be cafe seating or something, that's something we could include. I think the budget that we've set aside for the plaza is robust enough to include a lot of different ideas.
Because if we could get a covered building there that had the ability to be rented out, it could be included in the PAC. If, let's say, you know, our dream when the PAC was being built and we were talking about having the hotel right next to it, was that the hotel would have space for conferences. Well, you know, that hasn't happened. And we don't know if we'll have a hotel there or not. But the PAC does have limited space. And so if on the plaza, if we could have at least a building that we could, when the PAC is having an event, it could spill over into that area. It could be a useful tool for the city.
Yeah, and just to be, just to share all the stuff behind the curtain. Although, by the way, so the Trent Development Agreement, we talked about schedule a little bit this morning. Trent Development Agreement will come to LUTC on the 6th of November, and then we'll have it immediately come to a study session on the 7th of November. So you guys will get a double header of talking about the details of all of this. So right now, Tanya is still pursuing the viability of a hotel to be included in TC3. And I talked with Trent about that today, and they still understand. They want her to keep pressing on trying to see if there's actual market for a hotel. And if there is, then I would assume we would potentially have a hotel on the property. It would go likely on one of those spaces where a residential building is, or might get stacked with the residential, kind of like the hotel thing in, I think it's Tukwila, there's a hotel residential, hotel apartment kind of thing. Yeah.
Alrighty, thank you.
I have one last comment. You know, Councilmember Tran said something about, what was it? Not a tourist attraction? I mean, to me, that's the cherry on top of this whole thing.
Right.
If you could figure out how to make some monumental draw on the light rail from Seattle to come to Federal Way to go to some amazing museum or something that everybody wants to say I was part of and came to on a regular basis, I would put that in there in a heartbeat. If you know, there's got to be somebody like, anyway, I always talk about the Children's Museum in
Yep.
Phoenix.
Yep.
Over the top. I mean, people fly in there to go to this with their kids. I've done it. Anyway, just keep the creative juices going is all I'm saying.
Yep, totally agree.
Well, the Batman line. And we'll call out Chief Wong. Okay, I guess with this committee, this is information only, would you like to see this come back for a committee business for action? I mean, we've had this information, figure out how to bring it forward so we can actually figure out how to talk about it.
Isn't that on November 6th?
What's that?
Or is it?
This is information
it-
only.
So
Yes, isn't it coming back in
so
November?
the development agreement is, so right now the development agreement is coming back. The recommendations from the advisory group, generally have kind of put into this work plan here on this slide.
Okay.
So unless you guys see something that you want to raise a yellow flag over, if you are comfortable with this as kind of a next steps for us, then we've got our marching orders. We'll work on the development agreement, and then we'll start, with column 2 for 20, and this takes us down a couple years into the future, and then by then, the landscape probably will have changed quite a bit about the conversation on.
So, and you're actually right, this is going to come back to land use, I think, so, hey, enough said.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Keith, thank you for all your work. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
And now, Mr. Smith, progress and updates on Sound Transit. This should be,
Yes, good
Great.
evening. Should be quick. So, yes, Kent Smith with the City of Federal Way Public Works Department, here for the update on the Sound Transit activities in the city. For Federal Way Link Extension north of 317th, realignment and restoration of Bingham and Creek is wrapping up. Storm drainage, landscaping, plinths, noise wall construction, system duct bank, ballast, OCS installation, fencing, and MSE wall is still ongoing along the corridor. Rail delivery installation welding is continuing, and they're doing some signal house work. For the city center, the phased closure of 23rd Avenue South continues. They're working on some additional concrete roadway, which has started on the other half of 23rd, as well as some additional spots along South 317th related to the entrances to Marlene's. Roadway work for the new internal roads, which is South 319th and 22nd Avenue South, has begun. A lot of it's preliminary, but a little bit more on 319th. Sewer, water, additional utility work also ongoing for 317th and 23rd. Station work ongoing, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, elevator, escalator, fire line, and ceiling panel installation. Construction of the garage extension is ongoing. They're doing plumbing, HVAC, a little bit of fire protection rough-in, and the main garage crane is planned to come down within the next few weeks. The end-of-line facility, interior work ongoing, along with door installation, ceiling installation, floor installation. An agreement to extend the staff funding for Photo Link Extension is being executed between Sound Transit and the city. The language finally got finalized a couple weeks ago. This extends the staff funding level, essentially keeping the level as planned with a planned sort of reduction as we get into closeout. Just moves it for the additional time that was required based on extending, which provides for an additional around $2 million for city staff time. That extends it through July 2026. Operations and Maintenance Facility South. I don't have any significant updates, but I just wanted to again point out that there's some public meetings. The online meeting is October 19th, and the in-person October 24th. Similar for Tacoma Link Extension, no significant updates since the last meeting. Their current schedule for the DEIS is to be published in mid-2024, and then their FEIS issued in mid-2026 with the Sound Transit. So then select the project to be built in late 2026, the Sound Transit Board. And I'll answer any questions.
We'll start down at the end. Councilmember McDaniel?
Actually, I got kind of a request, not a question. Can you actually notify me when they take the main crane down? I find it fascinating. I'd like to see if possible.
Sure.
I mean, it sounds weird, but it's fascinating how they do that.
Deputy Mayor Honda?
Hard to ask questions after that, I mean.
I was curious myself. I wanted to go see it. So cool.
So, it's been a while since, as a council, we've sat down and talked with Sound Transit staff themselves. I'm sure that there's a lot of work happening that we have no idea what they're doing, but when will we get any kind of idea of how they're getting from downtown, under the power lines, through Belmore Park, out to Fife? You know, because I know all that had to change at some point, and so it would just be nice if we got some kind of idea of what Sound Transit is thinking of, and how it's gonna impact the city, and it would be nice to know. Because I know the work's being done.
Right. A lot of the route is, I wouldn't say a lot, a portion of the route is is essentially set, like you said, going through Belmore Park, continuing to where the OMF South building will be proposed, or at least if they go with the preferred alternative, I'll say. So that, a lot of that track section is essentially in the location that it doesn't change based on their alternatives.
So before you go on, so if it's set, if they already know how they're getting through Belmore Park, have they notified the property owners?
They are in the process of notifying them, yes.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Along with that, though, a large portion of the alternatives are not actually directed as a preferred alternative, and essentially, back to this slide with the TDLE, when they get to this Sound Transit Board selecting the project to be built, that locks in the location of which route they will take. The specifics kind of can shift a little, but essentially, we won't know until late 2026.
And where the station might be?
Correct. That's when they select the preferred alternative is the one that they will build. Or a non-preferred alternative, it's up to them. If that makes sense.
Okay, I would just like to have more information as to what, any options that they're talking about.
When we get to the DEIS in mid-2024, there will be a larger explanation of the alternatives, the station alternative locations, what those could look like, and then that's the point to comment on which one the city would prefer, which one citizens would prefer, or the general public. So it's a whole, at that point in mid-2024, that we'll have a lot more information.
And at that point, if, let's say we didn't like something, it's probably too late to change it.
Not necessarily. But it just depends how strong a push it is that we don't like it.
Yeah. All right. No, thank you.
Chair, can I jump in for 1 second? So for the OMF facility specifically, there's a study section at the 2nd October meeting that's being done by Kent, but to basically highlight the plans that are in the draft EIS. There's a copy of it that Amy has for the council in the council office already, a paper copy, and then I think I emailed it to you as well. But that will go through the plan somewhat in detail, to your point about Belmore, to show what the preferred is that's being advanced through the DEIS. Council, historically with the previous project, with the Federal Whaling Cake project, has, as part of the study session and then in the follow-on full council meeting, directed the mayor and staff to draft a letter with whatever the thoughts of council are from the study session. So I think there's, at least on our end, a little bit of an anticipation that for the OMF facility, which is kind of the first area you were talking about, Deputy Mayor, that would be the follow-on action that occurred at the council meeting after the study session with any feedback related to Belmore, BPA lines to get to the OMF facility. That's kind of part one. Part two, the TDLE project, with all the delays with Sound Transit, that's effectively been delayed significantly. And what they're working on right now is environmental reconnaissance for the different routes. Until they have that done, which to Kent's point is not for a long time, there's not really any updated information to share with council. They're kind of in the fact collecting message or point. They're not sharing information with staff either. They're out there doing their homework, trying to figure out what all the pitfalls are of the different routes. When they get that'll be the point that, to your point, they come back and start addressing council with actual collected information, but that's still a ways out.
So a ways out is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
Late 24 would probably be the earliest. 25 is probably more realistic.
Okay.
I was in their interagency meeting that was this afternoon, and they were just speaking on the bridge that goes over the Puyallup River and requiring more information on that one. So they're that's one piece of a larger puzzle. So there's a lot left to still get.
Oh, I realize there's a lot of work. And a lot of decisions that need to still be made. It's been frustrating, working with Sound Transit and getting information and as how council has gotten it over the years, so, thank you.
I have two questions for you. The $2,060,000, is that the same structure? I read in the paper the other day, Kent got $1 million and some dollars from Sound Transit. That's just to cover staff?
Yes. Yeah,
Did you mean the city of Kent or Kent Smith?
Or me.
Yeah, okay, but that's what that dollars is for. Same thing Kent was in the Kent Reporter, just a different number.
Yeah, essentially.
That's correct.
Okay, the other thing that, I'll ask a question. I got a call from a developer asking what I knew about Sound Transit, going around talking to developers about would they be interested in buying the property and building things on it and what they thought it was worth. Are you guys aware of that or have any comments on that?
Not specifically. I know that if this is a part of their transit-oriented development team, they are looking into what is potentially possible with those properties that they're going to have left when they're done with their laydown area.
Huh.
And they did hire a consultant to analyze the market to determine what, similar to what we did with TC3, essentially, to look what the market could support, what could potentially go in, and based on the rules they have of what they could put there. So we might be reaching out.
So if those, I'm assuming that's going on because this random call came to me. Are we in those discussions with Sound Transit that, hey, call us, we're maybe a player too? Or is that maybe something?
No.
No?
No,
Could we be?
No, it's no different than any other private property owner that they are free to talk to whoever they want about whatever they want. They don't have to vet that through us.
No, but could they call us as a potential property acquisition?
Sure, if the city had an appetite to buy the TOD parcels, we could certainly approach them and say, hey, we're interested in buying them.
But they know that there's interest at the city level, or at least I keep hearing that over the years. Not saying it.
Yeah, I am not aware that we've ever gotten direction from council to attempt to acquire those parcels. So I guess if that is the direction of council, I can certainly talk to the mayor about it, but I don't.
Okay, well.
I'm actually not aware of the city expressing interest to Sound Transit to acquire them.
Okay. Councilmember McDaniel?
To what you said there, I mean, getting a price is a price.
What's that?
I said just asking for a price point is getting a price.
I mean, it
point
was,
at least.
it's some consultant on a phone calling, I'm sure, different developers. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody have any other points they'd like to bring up before we close this meeting at 6:45? Okay, thank you.
Right.